Hi, I'm Dane Ortlund with Crossway Books, and it's my great privilege to sit down for a few minutes today with Mike McKinley, pastor of Guilford Baptist Church outside Washington, D.C., who's just written a book with us. It'll be out in a few months here, the title of which is, Am I Really a Christian? Now, Mike, in the introduction to this book, you say, this is a book aimed at convincing you that you may not be a Christian. Now, you're a pastor.
Yeah.
That's not loving to say that to someone.
Yeah,
or is it?
It may not seem like it at the outset, but because the Bible itself encourages us to examine ourselves, the Bible at least gives us a category for thinking that there are people who are self-deceived, who think they're Christians but they're really not, and that by definition those people don't know it, that it's actually a loving thing to do to help people to examine themselves to see if maybe in fact they're not Christians. Because if they're not, then that's really helpful information for them to have.
So ultimately, this is the most loving thing you could do, is help open someone's eyes by the grace of God to their perilous state. Mike, in the book you define a Christian, very sensible thing to do, and use the specific category of new birth to do that.
Yep.
You say a Christian is someone who has been granted the new birth as a free gift from God. And you explain that there are other metaphors that the Bible gives us to define a Christian. Sure. Adoption, a Christian is a son or daughter of God, justification. Why did you choose the new birth as a way to define what a Christian is?
Yeah, well, as you mentioned, there's a bunch of different ways we could describe what it means to be a Christian. But I chose new birth for a couple of reasons. One, because Jesus himself in John chapter 3 talks about no one will enter the kingdom of heaven unless they've been born again. And ultimately, Jesus is going to be our judge. And so we should pay careful attention to what he says about the matter of who he figures out as his people, who he thinks of as his people. But also because that idea of new birth gives a great picture to the sort of transforming nature of being a Christian. That a Christian isn't one who's just joined a certain club. It's not an ethnicity. It's not a cultural group. But it's someone who lives a completely different life, who's been born again, in Jesus' words, who's been granted a total new existence. And so really the book is dedicated just to examining what the fruits of that new life are.
Okay. So, Mike, what you're telling me is that a Christian is not someone who has simply prayed a prayer, walked an aisle, raised a hand, signed a card. May not be less than those things, but a Christian is someone who's been totally, they've started over, and God's given them new life. On another plane than what they had before.
Yep.
One thing that you come back to at each chapter in your book, as you point out here are the marks of a true Christian, is the importance of a believer living life in the context of the local church with other believers. Talk a little bit about why you kept coming back to that.
Yeah, well, first of all, the Bible tells us over and over again that the shape of the Christian life is meant to be one in community. So in that sense, a Christian should be connected in to other people. And one of the things about being self-deceived is that you don't know you're self-deceived. And so oftentimes we need other people who know us to be able to give us input. So for example, on Sunday at my church, I was preaching and I had a really bad head cold. I still do, in fact. And so all through the sermon, I was sort of sniffling and coughing and hacking. And after church, my wife brought over a visitor that she wanted me to meet. And so I stood there and I greeted the visitor, talked with her, and tried to make her feel welcomed, things like that. And then as she was leaving, my wife was walking away, and she turned around and just went like this. She went to indicate that I had something stuck in my nose. And I thought, that's really helpful, that's loving. But somebody else, something that really everyone else in the whole church saw for the entire Sunday.
Painful love.
Yeah, I couldn't see in myself. And though that's a silly picture, it's a true picture. Other people see things much more clearly about us sometimes than we see about ourselves. And so as we enter into the question, am I really a Christian? And as we start to think about the biblical evidences and the biblical categories and criteria for that, it's not something we should do by ourselves because we can't see ourselves very well sometimes. Instead, other people sometimes will have input and be able to give us helpful feedback.
Excellent. Am I really a Christian? Run through with me here, Mike, the 5 marks you identify from the Bible of what characterizes a true Christian. Someone who believes true doctrine,
Yep. Yeah.
So a Christian is not necessarily someone who just likes Jesus, you say.
Yeah. It's not a cultural affiliation, but the Bible makes it clear that if anyone denies that Christ has come in the flesh, that he's not a Christian. So
Okay.
things like that are essential.
Believes right doctrine, hates sin.
Mm-hmm.
Christian is not someone who enjoys flirting with sin regularly and repeatedly, though we all fall, we all sin, even as believers. Help me out here. What are the other ones?
A true Christian continues on in the faith.
Continues on, perseveres on.
Yeah. So just at one point saying that you're a Christian doesn't mean that you really are a Christian, but you give particular evidence to the validity of your faith by living that out over an extended period of time.
Okay. A true Christian, Mike, loves other people.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, 1 John's very clear that if you don't love your brother who you do see, how can you claim to love God who you don't see?
And a Christian is someone, Mike, who is free from love for the world. So they're loving other people, and their affections are increasingly becoming disengaged from the things of the world.
Yeah, exactly. They've picked up their cross. They've left the world behind.
Okay.
And they're following after Christ.
All right.
Yeah.
Mike, you say that you're hoping that the message of this book lands on unbelievers in a certain way and on believers in a certain different way.
Yeah.
Unpack that.
Yeah, hopefully as someone works through the book, they'll come either to be convinced that they're not a Christian, in which case I hope they would then not merely just sort of stay at that point, but to see their need for Christ and to genuinely trust in Him for the first time. And I hope that if Christians read it, they use it as a tool for self-examination, so as the Apostle Paul tells us to examine ourselves. And then I hope it points them also to Christ as they see the evidences of regeneration in their life. My hope is that makes them more grateful, more amazed at what God has done in their life, as they see that, in fact, look at the way God has transformed them and given them new birth.
Excellent. So really you want there to be a clarifying effect on both unbelievers and believers, that the fog can lift and we can understand where we stand with God.
Yeah. Oftentimes you have people who are quite sure they are Christians, even though their lives give no evidence. And also, oftentimes you have well-meaning, sincere Christians who struggle with assurance of faith and wonder if they can really ever know if they are saved. So my hope is that the book will encourage them to see that fruit of regeneration in their life.
Mike, is there one thing that if someone picks up this book and reads it, that you hope is left ringing in their ears as they go on in their life?
I guess the most important thing, I think, is that the question we all have to ask ourselves as we're thinking about, am I really a Christian, is not to look back to any past event, any card you've signed or prayer you've prayed, though those things are good things, perhaps. But the question to ask is, am I trusting Christ now? Am I trusting Christ at this moment? And am I trusting Him for the future as well?
Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's a pleasure.
For having a few moments with us here. Thank you for writing the book. We're so pleased to partner with you here at Crossway, Mike, in the writing of this book. We have every hope that this will help clear the fog for many people by the grace of God and to the glory of God.
I pray that it does.
Again, the title of the book is Am I Really a Christian? By Pastor Mike McKinley, coming out from Crossway this June.